This is going to be a 5-minute tackle tip. So earlier this year, you saw me doing a little flipping at Neely Henry in one of the Bass Opens. There you go. There we go. I'll start somewhere. Ladder. And I had some questions about what that setup was and why I was using that over some of the other baits that you traditionally see for flipping. So in that video, you saw that I was using like a straight tail worm, much like the ones that I'm picking out here to show you about. Very simple setup. A lot of times when you're talking about flipping, you'll see guys use a cross style bait or a creature bait. But when you put about 200 boats on a small body of water for 4 or 5 days, they don't like all that flapping and flopping around. That's when you got to start going to something a lot more simple to catch the fish. So for that, I do something that I call light duty flipping. Basically where I'm taking a plastic, a straight tail plastic, something like this, and I'm using a light sinker, lighter line, lighter action rod, and I'm flipping it in the same place that you would usually go with braided line or 20-pound test fluorocarbon. Here's some of the equipment you need to get this job done. It's totally different than your traditional flipping setup. Let's go get a rod and a reel. I'm not going to use a spinning rod. I'm not going to use my traditional flipping setup. I'm going to use this guy right here. This is my rod for light duty flipping. This is the entire setup right here. Very simple. This is a 7'2" medium heavy powered rod. It's a hex. It's got a little tip in it. That's not your traditional setup. The reason being is I'm only going to use 12 to 15 pound tests. So I'm using 12 to 15 pound tests, a medium heavy power rod, and I'm using a Lew's Hyper Mag. This entire setup weighs about as much as a sheet of notebook paper. So there's a reason that I'm using 12 to 15 pound test fluorocarbon. Since I'm only using a very light sinker, an 1/8 ounce or a 3/16 ounce sinker, if I were to use 20 pound test fluorocarbon, you wouldn't even be able to flip it. It would be too light. So I downsize the diameter, create a little bit less resistance on my spool as the line's exiting the reel, and I can take a small bait like this or 4-inch soft plastic and I can flip it and be super intentional with it. I'm gonna use the Lew's Hyper Mag, 12, 15 pound test, a 7'2" medium heavy power rod, something with some tip in it. This is the hex. You don't have to have the hex, but just make sure you're using something that's got a little bit of tip in it. You need 3 components. Right here I'm using Strike King tungsten. This is a 3/16 ounce. I'd use a 3/16 or an 1/8 ounce sinker on these guys. I do not peg my sinker doing this technique. You can, but I do not. Don't ask me why. I don't peg the sinker. I don't see a need to peg the sinker, and I think if you don't peg the sinker when you don't need to, you're better off. Basically 2 hooks that I like to use, and I'm gonna show you the scenarios that I like to use each hook. I like to use, this is just a owner offset hook, and one that I found in this tournament that I really started to like to use is this one right here. This is an owner cover shot, and this shot is actually meant for drop shotting, but it's a great light duty hook. It's made out of something they call Zoe wire. It's really strong, but if you look at it, you can see it's a small diameter hook, so I don't have to set the hook really hard on it, and it's a straight shank, which it tends to give you a little bit more kick out on the plastic. What I normally use is a offset like this one. You can see the gauge wire is a lot bigger, but I think from now on I'm going to go to this one. I usually use an offset because it actually seems like it comes through wood a lot better than a straight shank. You don't hang up around docks and wood as much as you do with a offset like you do with straight shank. This one performed pretty good for me, so I'm gonna start using it from now on until I know better. So I'm gonna use the old school Palomar knot, run the line through the line tie twice. It'll set like this. I'm just gonna make an overhand knot with the bunny ear that you created. You want a knot tying video, check the link in the description box. I'm gonna wet that, make it nice and sloppy like that. Pull my hook back through that loop I made. I know I'm doing that fast, but this is a 5-minute tip, and it is not a knot tying video. It's more of a technique video. Take your cutters,
cut off the tag end. You do want to cut that tag end enough. I've learned this as a recent too. You do need to cut the tag end enough to where the sinker sets right on the hook. So that's what you're left with. 3/16 ounce sinker on the top. You got a 4-out owner cover shot on the bottom, and then we're going to go to our plastic. You saw me flipping 2 plastics in this video. You saw me using this one right here. This is Z-Man Bang Sticks. So try it, dude. Boom. Good. Very, very, very good core right there. That one right there, this is in Mood Ring, and I also use the Z-Man Finesse Worms in Watermelon Red. That's pretty much the only 2 baits I use. I'm just going to Texas rig this guy. Very simple setup, you guys. It is nothing super fancy about this. It's the presentation that's fancy about this. It's not the actual setup himself. Rig it in about a 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. Then you're going to come back to the top. And I actually like to bury that hook in Elastec as much as possible. And then what you're left with is this little tiny morsel right here. Light sinker, light wire hook, and a small straight plastic. That's what makes it a light duty flipping rig. I promise you, it'll catch them when nothing else will. Light duty flipping works.